This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
The Shabbos that we read Parshas Bereishis is given a special name, a special nomenclature. And the name of the Shabbos is Shabbos Bereishis. And this is a unique name. We don't name any other Shabbos after the Parsha. It's not Shabbos Noach, Lech Lecha, and so on. Why Shabbos Bereishis? And this is not just something that we happen to call the Shabbos, but for instance, if you look in the Levush says in Archaim, Siman Tafrei Samach Tes, Shabbos Sha'achar Chag, Nikra Shabbos Bereishis. The Maril, one of the backbones of Minhag Ashkenaz, he says Shabbos Bereishis Hu Samach B'chol Shana Achar Hasukais. So why is that? Why do we call it Shabbos Bereishis? As we know, the great principle that is enunciated by the Rama and the Darkei Moshe in Archaim Siman Reish Tzadik Ches of Katan Beis, Va'ani Oimer Ki Minhagan Shal Yisrael Torah. And I say the custom of Israel is Torah. Or as the Magen Avram says in Archaim Siman Shin Zayin Siv Katan Tazayin, Va'ani Oimer Minhag Yisrael Torah. So if this is the custom of Israel, if this is the custom of the Jewish people, then it's Torah. We have to understand Torah Hi V'Lumadanu Tzarech. What is the significance and the fact that we call this Shabbos Bereishis? So interestingly, the Divrei Yecheskel, the Shinava, brings an explanation in the name of his father-in-law, the Baal Aryeh de Be'ilah, Reb Aryeh Leibush, the Abbezin of Vishnitza. He says the reason why we are mechane this Shabbos Bereishis, is during the Yom Naraim, everybody had thoughts of tshuva, everyone has been mekabel on himself, good customs, good practices, and therefore we call it Shabbos Bereishis because it reminds a person that whatever happened, and from now begins a new Bereishis, a new beginning, and one has to try to improve themselves from here and on. But let's perhaps add some explanation to this idea that the whole Shabbos is transformed because we read Parshas Bereishis. We know a well-documented yesod is that the time of the year is reflected in the Parsha that is read. So for instance, this is an idea brought in the Shla, in the Shnei Luchos Habris, Parshas Devarim, Torah Ois Yodalid, why we read the Parshiyos of the distribution of Eretz Yisrael during the Bein HaMetzarim. The Oyev Yisrael talks about why we, in Parshas Pinchas, why we read Parshas Pinchas Bein HaMetzarim, because that is the Parsha that talks about the Moyadim, and this is the time of the year which is the source and the shirish of all the Mayadei Hashana, and the Bnei Yissaschar as well as in the Mamori Chodesh Tammuz and Av Ois Beis speak about why we read the Parshiyos of Matos and Masei every year in the Bein HaMetzarim, because it talks about the distribution of Eretz Yisrael, and Parshas Pinchas talks about the distribution of Eretz Yisrael, which we're hoping for during the Bein HaMetzarim. So we see the Parshiyos that we read at certain times of the year have a connection to that particular time of the year. Or, interestingly, for instance, even further, Rav Wolfson in his Sefer Amunas Eitach Parshas Vaschanan points out that a Parsha that is read at a certain time of the year has in it the Shoresh and the Segula and the Kedushas Hazman of that particular time of the year, even when we read that Parsha Keseder. So for instance, Rav Wilson brings from the Chayz of Lublin that when you read Parshas Boy and Beshalach, you could be margish a hisayrus of Pesach, and when you read Yisroi, you could feel the Kedusha of Shavuos. In fact, he brings from his father that why do we read Kisoyled Banim Uvnei Banim on Tisha B'Av? There are many tragic parts of the Torah that could be read on Tisha B'Av. So he says that since the Parsha that of the week, which is read Tisha B'Av time, is Va'aschanan, if we were to read a different Kriyas HaTorah on Tisha B'Av, that Kriyas HaTorah would have in it from the Segulas Hazman of Tisha B'Av, and we would be ma'orer the Kayach of Tisha B'Av at a different time of the year. For instance, if let's say we read the Toichach of Kisavai or B'chukaisai on Tisha B'Av, then every year when we read B'chukaisai or Kisavai, we would be ma'orer the Zman of Tisha B'Av. We wouldn't want to do that. So Chazal instituted that the Kriyas HaTorah Tisha B'Av is Va'aschanan, because anyway we read Va'aschanan around the time of Tisha B'Av. So we wouldn't be being ma'orer the Zman of Tisha B'Av at a different time of the year. But Reb Simcha Zisel Broida in the Sam Darach, he has he brings out a marvelous concept that not only is the time of the year connected to the parsha that is read, but the time that a parsha is read actually affects what transpires at a certain time. So, for instance, the Magen Avram says that when the Svarim, the 24 cartloads of Svarim were burned in France in the year 1242, so they did a Shelas Chalaim and they wanted to determine why it happened, and they realized, they asked via the heavens, and the response was that Parsha was Chukas, and the response was the Targum on that Parsha, and namely, Da Gezeras Ayraisa. And the Magen Avram brings that they felt that because Chukas was read that week, that it was Goyreim, so to speak, what transpired and what happened at that particular time. So the effects and what occurs and what transpires at certain times is affected by what is read in the Torah at that time. So applying that to Bereishis, although the year begins in Aleph Tishrei, nevertheless, if we read Parshas Bereishis that talks about Brias Ha'olam and a new beginning and a new creation, we read that at the end of Tishrei as we're headed into Cheshvan, then despite the fact that the year begins Rosh Chodesh Tishrei or Nisan, nevertheless there has to be a new Reishis, a new beginning when we read Parshas Bereishis. So this is not just a Shabbos that we happen to read Bereishis, but this is Shabbos Bereishis. In a way, it has in it the Segulas Hazman of the first Shabbos of creation, because we're reading about the creation of the world. So it's not only that we're just, like the Shinava Rebbe said, that this is in the aftermath of the Yom Naram, and we've taken new Kabbalahs, and we could say to ourselves, let bygones be bygones, and this is a new beginning. But because we read Bereishis now, it is Goyreim, the Segulas Hazman of Brias Ha'olam, and of a new beginning for every single Jew, just like the world was renewed and recreated by Brias Ha'olam. That is what is occurring every year when we read Parshas Bereishis. So let's take advantage of the new Hischadshus of Bereishis Bar Lekim Is HaShamayim V'Yis HaAretz, and may it be a year of Besuras Tovas, Simchas and Nachas, Lanu U'Lechol Yisrael. Amen.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.